This is the review for Math 3, Unit 7 on circles and parabolas. So our first slide of the review was what is a definition of a circle. So I'm just going to talk through this one instead of writing it. So a circle is the set of all points equidistant from a given point, which we call the center. So a set of all points equidistant from a given point or center. Definition of a parabola is the set of all points equidistant from a line called our directrix and a point, our focus. So if you want to see what these definitions are, they're on page 222 of our Pearson book. And let me see what the other one is. And this one is on page 235. So page 222 and page 235, that's where you can find the written definitions. Okay, so for question number 3, we're looking to find the center and the radius. So in order for us to do that, we want to be able to complete the square for both of these. So for A, I want to rearrange. I want to put my x terms together. And I'm going to have to add a constant there to complete the square. And then I want to put my y terms together. And I want the minus 3 to go to the other side, so I'm going to add the 3 over. So when I add 3, and then whatever I add to the left, I also have to add to the right. So in order to find the constant here to complete the square, I'm trying to figure out what two numbers add together to give me 8. So that would be 4 and 4, because I want to take half of 8 always. And then 4 times itself is going to be my constant to have a perfect square trinomial. And the same thing here. So I'm going to take half of negative 6, that's negative 3. And then negative 3 times itself will give me 9. So I added 16, there's no coefficient, and I added 9, no coefficient. So I'm adding 16 and 9. And then once I get to here, I want to factor. So I'm going to take this group right here and factor that group. So this will end up being x plus 4 quantities squared, right? Because I'm using 4 twice. And then this is negative 3 quantities squared. And so then add up this side. So 3 plus 16 is 19, plus 9 more is 28. So then that gives me my descriptive form of a circle. So the center. So I look here to see how my x is being adjusted. So I'm going to have my center at negative 4. So I'm going to do opposite of that. And then figure out what my center k value is here. So it's adjusting the y. So it's minus 3, so I'm going to use plus 3. And then this is my radius squared. So my radius will be the square root of 28. And then if I simplify that, that breaks down to 4 times 7. I don't know that square root. And then the square root of 4 is 2. So now it also said to sketch it. So for sketching this one, just kind of wing it here just a little bit. So left 4 and then up 3. And then for the square root of 28, if I type that into my calculator, I would get a little over 5. I think it's around 5.3. So then from my center, I'm going to go up 5. So left 5 and right 5 and down. So something like that, and then try to connect it so where it looks roundish and I'm kind of hitting all the dots. Okay? Alright, so that was 3A. So now let's take a look at 3B. So same idea here. So this time the constant's already over to the other side, so that saves me a step. X squared doesn't have an x term to go with it, like how this had x squared and 8x, so that means I don't have to complete the square here. I just have to do it on those two. So this one turns out to be quite a bit easier. So I need to figure out what to add to my y terms so that I can turn this into a trinomial. And so I know 5, half of 10 is 5, so 5 plus 5 is 10. And then 5 times itself is 25, so I want to add 25 to both sides. And then this is the part I want to factor, so I don't need to factor my x squared term. And then add my constants. And that gives me my circle in descriptive form. Okay, so a couple things to make sure you're always paying attention to is, do you have your squared terms? Do you have a plus, right? That's things that we tend to mess up on. And if this is a positive, it should have a positive. If it was a negative, it should be a negative. So then for my center, I'm adding nothing to my x, so that would be 0. And then my k value here would be -5, so it's 0, -5. This is the radius squared. So the radius will be the square root of 36, which is 6. Okay. And I'm not going to graph that one, but you would just plot your center 0, -5, and then go up, down, left, right, 6, and then connect to get your circle. Okay, question number 4. It says to find the equation of a circle with center for -1 and passes through the point -2, 1. So a lot of us tend to make a mistake on what's my h and k value, x and y value. So I'm going to write it again, even though I know it's tedious. I have 4 and -1, so there's h and k. And then they give me the point -2, 1, which is x and y. So I have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals my radius squared. So I'm trying to find my radius right now, right? That's what I'm trying to solve for. Or my radius squared, because that's what I need in the equation. So I'm going to take my x value and replace it, minus, take my h value, replace it, and I still have a squared. So a lot of you want to put a +4 here, right? But we want to follow the formula. I want to substitute my values in the way I see it. So x is -2 minus h is +4. And do the same thing for my y term. So I have y is 1 minus k is -1 and then squared. Don't get in a rush, because when you do, you tend to make little mistakes. So be careful what you're doing, watch how you're substituting, and then be careful with your arithmetic. So this ends up being -6. And then this turns into 1 plus 1. So -6 squared is +36. 2 squared is +4. So then I know r squared is going to be 40. And that's not my answer, right? That's just telling me what my radius squared is. And so to actually come up with my solution, I take this equation here, but what I need to do is I need to replace my h, my k, and my r squared term, right? Those are the values I need to replace. So this will get a number, and then my x and y will stay x and y, because those gives me any point, right, on the circle. So I'm going to go from here. So I have x, and then minus h, so I'm going over here, right? Minus h plus, and I'm looking here again, y minus k minus a -1 squared, and then equals my radius squared, which was 40. And that would be my equation of a circle. Okay, and then let's take a look at number 5. So we're putting the following into descriptive form, and then we're stating the vertex and the direction the parabola opens, and then how many times does the graph intersect the x-axis. So descriptive form, just kind of a reminder. right? So I have either x is equal to or y is equal to in order to put into descriptive form. So pay attention to the fact that the squared is over here on the right-hand side, right? Squared is on the right-hand side, and then my linear term is on the left-hand side. And then my x should not have a coefficient, my y should not have a coefficient. It should always be in front of those parentheses. So what I want to do for A, let me get a tissue paper here, is I want to flip that around. So I want my linear term on the other side and the squared. So I'm just going to flip that around. That just gets the squared on the right-hand side. And then I want to make sure that this is going to be, the 2 is over here in front, right? Because we want that there. So I'm going to divide by 2. And then when I divide by 2, that's the same as multiplying by 1/2. So that gives me my first part, which is my parabola in descriptive form. So now it asks me to state the vertex. So for the vertex, I look to see what's affecting my x over here. So that would be -3. And then what's affecting my y, that would be -4. And then it also asks for which way does the parabola open. So it's a y equals, that means it's going to open along the y-axis. And then my stretch is positive, so it's going to point up. So I know that the parabola is going to point up or it opens up. And then I want to know how many times it crosses the x-axis. So I'm just going to do kind of a little sketch here just to get an idea. So I'm going to go left 3 and then down 4, so somewhere over here, and it's going to point up. So then if this extends up, it's going to cross twice. So then we cross the x-axis 2 times. Okay, that was part A. So now for 3B, same directions, put in descriptive form. So this one I have to put into the perfect square trinomial, right? So I'm going to have to complete the square in B and C. Now A I did not have to, right? Because it's already quantity squared, but B and C are not like that. So I have to put these into the perfect square trinomial, so I have to complete the square. So the first thing I want to do is I want to subtract the 10 over, right? So we want it to kind of look like the x minus h, and then my squared term pieces on the right-hand side. So I'm going to subtract 10. And then I look to see, do I have to factor anything out of these? And not my y, but just my numerical values. Is there a leading coefficient to factor out? And there's not. So that makes the problem easier. So then I need to figure out what to add over here and what to add over here. So I take half of -12, so -6 and -6, and then times that by itself, and that gives me positive 36. So there's no leading coefficient to multiply by. It's not grouped, so that means I get to add 36 over. So combine like terms and factor the right-hand side. And so now I'm in descriptive form, no leading coefficient on my x term, and I have a quantity squared. So my vertex, I look to see what's affecting the x, that's over here. So that would be -26, and then what's affecting the y, +6. This is an x equals graph, so that means it opens along the x-axis, so it's a sideways graph. The stretch is 1, so that means it's going to point to the right. So this one's just going to cross one time, right? I don't need to graph it, always just crosses one. So left 26, wherever that is over here, and then up 6. And then it's going to point to the right. And eventually this is going to drop down, right, and cross somewhere and hit the x-axis once. So this will cross one time. Okay. All right, and then for 5C, so I have to complete the square on this one as well. So I want to get both of these terms over to the other side, right? Because I always want it to be either y minus k or x minus h, where my squared terms are here. So that means I'm going to add y and subtract 10 to both sides. And then at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and flip-flop it, right? Because I want my squared term to be on the right-hand side. So I have this side is going to be y minus 10. And then I have this left here, 4x squared minus 24x. So in order to complete the square on here, I don't want to have a leading coefficient. So that means I need to pull out that 4. And that allows me to complete the square. So I'm going to factor out a 4. And I'm going to end up adding something here. And when I add over here, I'm going to be adding 4 times whatever that value is, right? Don't forget we're going to be multiplying this value by 4. And I do that because I have a leading coefficient and 4 is multiplying everything in here, including whatever I come up with on this number. So I'm going to take half of 6, so -3 and -3, and then do -3 times itself, so that would be +9. So then I added 9 to inside, right? But 9 is also being multiplied by 4. So then 4 times 9, and then simplify. So this will be y, and then plus 26, and then 4, and then x minus 3, and then squared. Okay. So then my vertex, I look to see what's affecting my x value. So that's over here. So that would be +3. What's affecting my y value? -26. And then it opens along the y-axis with a positive stretch, so it's going to open up. So graphing-wise, I go over 3, wherever that is, and then down 26, say here, and then it opens up, so it will cross twice. And there's number 5. Okay, number 6. So let me get a piece of scratch paper here. Okay, so for this one here, we want to put into descriptive form, state our vertex, focus, and directrix, and then sketch if that's helpful. And it definitely, the sketching is helpful, right? So the good news on this one is it's already in descriptive form. So I have my y equals, I've got my quantity squared, and then my coefficient. So for my vertex, I look to see what's affecting the x, so that's over here. So that would be -5, and then what's affecting my y, so that would be +1. Then I want to find my c value. So to do that, I know that 4c equals 2, right? I'm looking down here. So then solve for c, divide by 4. So c equals 1/2 or 0.5, whichever way you want to write that. So I'm going to do a little sketch here, and that helps me figure out where everything is, right? So there's my vertex, left 5 up 1. It's a y equals graph, so that means it's going to open along the y-axis, so up or down. The stretch is positive, so it's going to be opening up, so something like that, right? So to find my focus and my directrix from my vertex, I'm going to go up 1/2 and down 1/2. And then the directrix is the line, and it's crossing the y-axis. So I was originally at 1, right? This was at 1, according to my vertex, and then I went down 1/2. So if I'm at 1 going down 1/2, at 1 going down 1/2, my directrix would be y equals 1 minus 1/2 or 1/2. Same as 0.5, right? So either y equals 0.5 or y equals 1/2. For my focus, I'm at 1 again, right? Still at 1. And I go up 1/2. So for the focus, let me do that down here. I'm still at -5, right? On the x-axis, I'm still at -5. But then my y value, I started at 1, and then I went up, so adding 1/2. So I started at 1, and I went up 1/2. So then my focus would be -5, and then 1 and 1/2. Or 1.5, all the same, right? Okay, and then let's take a look at the second one. So for this one here, so I want to put this in descriptive form, so I want it to match kind of this look right here. So I want my linear term here, my coefficient, and then my squared term. So I'm going to just flip these around. And I want my coefficient to be over here, so I'm going to divide by -8. And then rewrite that as a fraction, so negative 1 over 8. Like that. So then for my vertex, look to see what affects the x and what affects the y. So negative 4, negative 2. Now I'm going to find my c value, so I know 4c equals 8, so then c equals 2. And you can drag that negative along with you as well, because then if you see that c is negative 2, even though it's a distance, it will remind you go in a negative direction. So if you write this as 4c equals negative 8, c equals negative 2, it might remind you, oh yeah, I need to go in a negative direction. So I'm going to do a little sketch here. My vertex is at negative 4, negative 2. And my graph is a horizontal graph, so it's an x equals, so it's going to open along the x-axis. My stretch is negative, so it's going to open to the left. So I know it's going to do something like that. So my focus is going to be over here, my directrix here. So from my vertex, I'm going to go left 2 and right 2. And there's my directrix. So my directrix is crossing the x-axis at negative 2. So there's my directrix at x equals negative 2. For my focus, so that's this guy here, I started out at negative 4, and then I went left 2, right? So negative 4 and I went left 2, so now I'm at negative 6, and my y value is still down here at negative 2. So my focus and my directrix. Okay, and then I will do 7 and 8 on the next video.